Hi, James.
Hi, Tony.
Welcome to University Challenged.
Delighted to be here.
Excellent. Let's start in time-honored fashion. Podcast's been going for nearly 2 years. So for the people that are listening today and for the listeners to come, could you share your full name and what it is you do today?
Yes, I can. So my name is James Gray. There is a middle name. I'm not going to share it, and not keen, not very keen on it. And
Okay.
I am the managing director of my own consultancy called Graystone Strategy. We work in the telecoms, media, technology space, working with clients, normally mobile operators, mobile network operators, or people that sell into that space.
Brilliant. So with that in mind, we're going to go back in time a little bit. So long before you ran your own consultancy firm, and we're going to go back to secondary school. So what are your memories of secondary school? How did you enjoy it?
I actually quite enjoyed secondary school. It was you didn't get a lot of choice about where you went when I went to secondary school. I was in a smallish rural community, and there was one secondary school you went to, so that's where you went. It was an interesting time. So I was in the year which was the first year to do GCSEs, so there was quite a lot of change in terms of the curriculum and getting used to it and so on. I think I probably won out of that. I suspect maybe GCSEs had to be a success, and therefore maybe the marking was a little bit, what's the word, kind of it. Maybe less. They were happier to make people successful. Interestingly, it was also a time when my school was on strike all the time.
Right.
So we yes, that things don't always change, do they?
No.
So the school ran what they called a truncated day. So you would get into school, you would do 50-minute blocks of lessons. It used to be an hour, so they sort of shaved 10 minutes off, and you'd be all done by 1 o'clock, and then they sent you home. So that was great because I got to do all my homework because I was quite diligent at that time. Got all my homework done and could then go out and have fun in the ways that teenage boys have fun. When it was still light. So that was quite good.
And it strikes me you saying that because strikes me. We are of similar. We're close in age. I think I'm only a couple of years younger than you. I don't remember there being strikes at school. So either I've got a big gap or there was something very specific that was going on with certain schools in the country. Do you know sort of what was going on then? And is it?
I don't really recall. I know it went on for a long time. I mean, it was my perception is it was like a year. It might not have been. It might have been half a year. I know me and my friends were all delighted with the outcome of it at the time. I'm not saying it really helped us out long term, but at the time we were delighted about it. But it was only my school, interestingly. So other schools in other catchments were still doing full. So whether it was that we had a particular union in my school, whether my school just had particularly politically active teachers. I don't know. I mean, it was quite an old school in terms of, back in the day, you still had to dodge the board rubber, and there was fairly regular fighting in the playground. Normally the teachers. And when I look at, I've got two daughters, as you know, and when I look at the schools that they've gone to, and the huge amount of opportunities for extracurricular activities that were put on the table for them and so on, you just realize how different it was. School was just, and for me, school was a place you went, you had to go there, you did your work. I was fortunate in that I was, relatively smart and in the upper sets and so on. But it wasn't a lifestyle choice. I wasn't involved in orchestras or dance classes and going on world tours and going singing in the Albert Hall. That
Yeah.
just didn't happen. School finished, you left. The teachers went to the pub. I mean, that's kind of how it seemed to work.
And I'm interested to know because with like the strikes that have been going on recently in the UK, so our school had one strike day in February, and people are like, "Oh my God, how will we cope? I have to work. Why aren't my kids in school?" Did both your parents work? What sort of happened? Did you just let yourself in when you got home, or what was the
Yeah,
setup?
yeah. So both my parents worked.
Yeah.
My dad worked in agriculture, so
Hmm.
in farming, and then subsequently sort of building field shelters for horses. And my mum kind of did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
She for a while she ran the local playgroup. She did
Yeah.
dog training lessons. She did cleaning. Anything to bring money in. I think actually at the time.
Yeah.
In terms of how it worked, so I just firstly we lived in a house which was in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So we were a third of a mile down an unmade road
Right.
with no neighbours,
Yeah.
and I would literally walk home from the school bus stop, which was 3 miles,
Yeah.
and then let myself in, just get on with it. I mean, pretty certain the house wasn't even locked. If I
No.
know, maybe the keys were under the dog bowl or something, but there wasn't like it was relatively easy to access out. I just let myself in and get on with
Yeah.
stuff basically. So, remember, I was at this point. I was then probably 14 to 16, and I had an
Yeah.
older brother, so I sort of had someone that could keep me in check if it
Yeah.
needed. So,
Yeah. And what were you studying? Was there a particular area in which you showed talent or you especially enjoyed?
um, yeah, I tended, considering I ended up in the career in marketing, which you'd consider to be the sort of more artsy side of things,
Mm.
I tended to be very focused on maths because I was quite good at maths. They let me take
Yeah.
my O level a year early, so I've actually got an O level and then a whole bunch of GCSEs.
Right.
Um, I enjoyed English.
Yeah.
I did not see the point in art. Just
Mm.
seemed like no point. So I didn't take that as an
Yeah.
option. They forced me, because again, as they still do now, there's certain things you have to do. So they forced me um, to do some sort of arts and crafts type thing. So I did something
Yeah.
called craft design and technology design and realization.
CDT. Oh,
Yeah,
yes. Oh my God. That's what we put.
yes,
CDT. Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Design and realization meant you drew up all the drawings and then you went
Yeah.
and built it. Or in my case, you drew up all the drawings and then you never quite got round to building it, but somehow still managed to get a C. Um,
Great.
so I tended to like the sort of academic-y type of
Mhm.
subjects because I was probably better at those. I'm not very practical now. Mrs. Gray won't let me put shelves up in the house because she knows it'd be a disaster. So yeah, that was sort of my leaning, I think. And
Mm.
I was relatively at that stage. I was relatively kind of good at relatively academic.
And what was the plan then? So were you following your dad into agriculture or were you off to do something else? What was your
So so back then, so I had a number of life plans.
yeah,
So when I was
great.
when I was leaving school, I
Hmm.
remember again, you could leave at 16 back then, so
Yeah.
you didn't have to go to college,
Hmm.
but I did plan to go to college and do A levels, and back then I was a child of Thatcher's 80s. I
Yeah.
wanted nothing more than to be a merchant banker driving a Porsche around and making loads of money, right?
In a pinstripe suit, I hope, with red braces.
Of course, with absolutely massive trousers and red braces. Yes,
Yeah.
that's definitely how it was. Um, that life plan changed as I went to college. So I did go to college. I
Okay,
went
yeah.
and studied maths, economics, and physics.
Okay.
Um, Potentially the worst choices I could have taken because they were all really difficult subjects.
Yeah.
Maths, I found, took a massive advance after I'd done O level maths, then additional O
Yeah.
level maths. A level
Yeah.
maths was bamboozling. just differentiation. What? And so it's and physics was equally bamboozling. Economics I quite liked. I could sort of see the application of economics, but unfortunately, in that period, I discovered motorbikes and girls, a heady cocktail, and we weren't particularly enforced to go to lessons at my college. You kind of turned up when you wanted to, and often I got diverted as I was riding my motorbike to college. I'd find myself on a nice country ride somewhere, and then I've missed physics. Oh,
right.
So I became significantly less engaged, and we often joke that my ultimate A-level grades actually spell out the qualifications that I got, because I got 2 N's and a U, so I actually got none. in terms of
Very good.
A levels. But I changed my life plan at that point. I had decided that a career in the forces was for me. I've always been really interested in the military and the army. I had a friend who had joined up, and he seemed to be enjoying himself. So the life plan was, I had it all mapped out. I was going to go to Sandhurst Military College,
right?
Because if you're an officer, you get a sword. Very important. I was going to train in the Army Air Corps to fly helicopters, which is a useful skill, I think. And then I was going to do my 15, have a military pension, go out to Saudi Arabia, flying helicopters for rich oil sheikhs, and basically just live the life.
So I'm intrigued to know how, as the son of a agricultural family that lives down a lane, an unmade road, how you sort of knew about that at such a young age. I mean, maybe my world was just small, but how did you know that you're like, if I go to Sandhurst, and Sandhurst is, quite it's very prestigious, isn't it? That's how you become an officer, do officer training. And I don't imagine that everybody would go, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'd always been really interested in the army, military history. I collected militaria. My bedroom was full of swords and gas masks and combat jackets and torches and goodness knows what else. So I was always quite into it. Because I had a friend who had joined up. He joined what's called a junior leaders regiment. So he joined at 16. I was able to, I got a bit of an inside track into the lifestyle and so on. Not that one, the military lifestyle. And generally, I think I just sort of saw it as being a good opportunity. I did research. I went and spoke to the career officers, and then to go to Sandhurst, you have to get sponsored by regiments. So imagine it's like a military university, but you've already got a regiment that says, we'll have that guy.
Okay, right, yeah.
So what I did was you do these things called POCs, potential officer camps. So you'd go, and there was an element of you selling yourself to the regiment. There was an element of the regiment telling you why working for the Royal Corps of Transport was just the most exciting job in the world, or not. And so I did that. So I had kind of three regiments that I'd visited, gone through the process. This was like 2 or 3 day process. You stayed in the officer's mess. You kind of shadowed an officer. So it was all quite. You got to a point where you're quite well informed about what you were letting yourself in for.
Okay. Yeah.
Albeit it was the sales pitch still, right? No one mentioned you might get shot. That didn't come up.
I wonder why.
Odd.
So,
but I managed to get sponsorship from the Royal Corps of Signals, which is really interesting considering I ended up in telecommunications. From the Royal Corps of Transport, which wasn't particularly exciting but was available, and the Army Air Corps, the one I really wanted, said that they would sponsor me, but not for a year. So I could
have to wait a year.
Have to wait a year.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I decided to wait a year, and that was the start of the diversion from the plan.
Okay, right. So you've already been diverted by motorbikes and girls and the
Yes.
potential of being a merchant banker. What's diverted you this time?
So I decided to wait for Army Air Corps because that's what I really
Yeah.
wanted to do.
Hmm.
I then needed to get a job.
Hmm.
There was never a conversation about gap years in our house or anything like
No.
that, and being funded. So
Yeah.
I went to get a job working for £80 a week plus commission in the local
Okay.
curry store,
Yeah.
and I really liked it,
Yeah.
which was surprising because I was quite shy. And I had to go and
Mm.
talk to complete strangers and sell them washing machines and things like that. But I
Yeah.
really liked it.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate that I had a very supportive assistant manager in the store who said, you really should think about going into management. They put
Yeah.
me on their accelerated management program, and within a year, I was an assistant store manager, earning more than £80 a week.
Yeah.
Um, and it's kind of like, this is actually quite interesting, quite fun. No
Yeah.
one's shouting at me. No one's making me run around mud with a rifle over my head.
Yeah.
And so I kind of pivoted again
Yeah.
and focused on sort of driving my retail management career instead.
And is there a connection to technology in there? Were you selling phones,
Yeah,
computers? Yeah.
Started off in curries, which was white and brown goods, which would be washing machines, dishwashers, vacuum cleaners, TVs, videos, camcorders.
Yeah. What's brown
Um,
goods? I've heard of white goods. What's brown goods?
brown goods. I know it's weird, isn't it? Brown goods is camcorders. Basically, it was the stuff Dixons used to sell. So camcorders,
Uh,
video recorders,
oh,
hi-fis, all that sort of
yeah.
stuff.
Hmm,
Um,
yeah. I had a wooden hi-fi at one point.
Absolutely, there you go. Yeah, that's nice binatone wooden effect or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and but yeah, we were now sort of into the 90s. The mobile
Hmm.
phone revolution was starting, and
Yeah.
I was managing a curry store in Windsor.
Mm. Wow.
Um,
Oh, nice.
and yeah, Windsor was nice actually, it was very
Mm.
pleasant. And the opportunity came to go and work for this new group in the chain called The Link, which was
Yes,
consultative. You remember them?
I do.
Consultative
Because Shed,
selling.
they used to use Shed Seven's song,
We did.
Speak Easy. Yeah. At
Speak
the link,
easy. At
it's
The Link, it's
easy.
easy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I can tell you a little bit about some of the advertising I did for them later on, but with dancing phones, goodness knows what.
Yeah.
Um, and so the opportunity came to sort of transfer across. They were looking for management, and I went
Yeah.
to go and work in the first store in Kingston.
Yeah.
I managed that, and then went through a succession of different roles. Managed Reading, then I went to Southampton, I think, and
Yeah.
then finally I ended up in Bath, um,
Right.
which was lovely. My
Yeah.
motivation for going to Bath was A, it was lovely, and
Hmm.
B, it's a town with its very own bun, and I found that very exciting. The first
A
thing I did
bath
when I
bun.
a Bath bun, yes.
Yeah.
It was the first thing I did when I checked out the store, and then I
Yeah.
went to the bakery and bought a Bath bun to see if I found that particular confection
Right. Oh, because you like
satisfactory.
buns. Yes, you like buns.
I,
Right.
I've I've got a very sweet tooth.
Right.
Um, uh, so so I ended up in the store in Bath, and that was ultimately became the top performing store in the country.
Wow.
Um, and they used to run an incentive, a Christmas incentive, and the
Hmm.
incentive was to win a car, and I won a car. Um,
Wow.
but what was I was thinking about this the other day. What was really interesting about Bath, the store, was it was the first time I really believed that me and the team
Mm.
could be top. It was
Right.
there was a kind of different, when it was a completely different mindset. I could
Yeah.
see the potential of the store. I believed we could succeed, and we
Yeah.
just drove really, really hard at it. And yes, we did succeed, and I won a car.
What did you win? Inquiring minds need to know.
So So I won a Peugeot 206.
Nice.
It's a very nice car. I
Mm.
kept it for it must have been 4 hours. So they delivered it to me,
Yeah.
brand new off the trailer.
Yeah.
And I had already found a buyer for it, actually somebody that worked for the link. So I drove it down to Cribbs Causeway where she worked, and sold it to her. So I turned my car into cash.
All
Um,
right. Wow. You
I
just flipped it.
just flipped it, wheeler dealer style.
Right.
Although I built depreciation in, which isn't actually wheeler dealer style. I didn't sell it for more. I sold it for less than it was worth.
Right.
But that was good. And then I took that money and the
Yeah.
money I've made from sort of sales bonuses and the money
Yeah.
I made from selling a house,
Yeah.
and I bought a Ferrari.
Okay, that sounds normal. How old were you at the time?
I was 26.
Wow. Okay. Blimey. Wow. Did they have time to take a picture of you with the Peugeot before you sold it?
but
Oh
but
my
actually,
goodness.
actually, internally, the story of the store manager who did very well and bought a Ferrari got quite a lot of credibility as well. So ultimately,
Yeah.
I don't think the leadership at the link were particularly concerned. I think they saw it as a positive thing. They certainly wanted to
Wow.
borrow the car.
I bet they did. So, and just within that, you're 26, you work in retail, but you're managing the most successful store in the group. You've bought and sold a house
Yeah,
by your mid-20s, which a lot of people think is not achievable anymore. And you got Ferrari. So if you think about, were any of your peers from school, were you still in touch with them?
yeah.
Was your experience unlike theirs?
It's a really good question. So I had friends at university for sure,
Hmm.
but I also had friends who'd followed similar career paths to me. Back then, there was less of this. You must go to university. The only
Yeah,
way you'll make a success of yourself at university. It was quite usual for people to finish school at 16. It
mm,
was a smaller percentage then went on to do A levels or BTECs
yeah,
or whatever, and then an even smaller percentage went to university.
yeah.
So I had friends at university, but yeah, by the time my friends were leaving university, I had bought a house. I bought my first house in Amazingstoke, actually. Um,
Ah,
so it was a 5-bedroom house, in one of the less salubrious areas of Basingstoke. It was a repossession.
yeah,
So I bought it
yeah.
for £19,000.
Good
Um,
grief. Okay.
and
Wow.
because it had 5 bedrooms, I moved
Yeah,
in many of my mates who worked there and
okay.
made some money out of rent.
Yeah,
Um, and it was basically just like a student house, only we had
yeah.
jobs. Imagine the
Okay.
young ones or bottom.
Yeah.
Pretty much that's what it was like. It was very unsanitary.
Uh,
Um,
I've been in one of those houses actually. Yeah, okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it was
I've got
it
the
was
picture.
pretty rough. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, but what it meant was, I already had financial security of sorts,
Hmm.
a career. By the time my friends that went to university were leaving university, I had
Yeah,
all that. Um,
yeah.
but I also still got to benefit from the perks of university because I had friends
Hmm.
there. So, yes, we went and stayed at their places and we went to the student union and we enjoyed ourselves.
Yeah,
Um, but then we went back to work to go and to fund the things that we wanted to do. Whereas I was looking at some of my university friends and they were basically potless. They were
yeah,
kind of eating noodles and
yeah,
and white toast, and that was kind of like their lives. So yeah, it went, considering it was unplanned,
yeah,
it went quite well.
yeah. And so there's an early sort of entrepreneurial spirit there. Um, did you go straight from flipping the Renault for a Ferrari to creating your consultancy or not?
No,
What
no, there
happened?
was there was some interesting career journeys. So
Hmm.
um, I had a conversation. You know, when you have one of those conversations and later on you realize it was a really important conversation in your life,
Yeah.
and kind of defined a direction. I had a
Mhm.
conversation with my my area manager at the time, so the guy that I reported into. Um, and the conversation was, a guy called Andy Brownwood. If you're listening, Andy, thanks very much. It was good advice you gave me. And basically, I said, look, I'm the top store in the company. I don't really see anywhere to go apart from backwards
Yeah.
from that in retail management.
Yeah.
Um, what do you suggest I do next? And he said, well, the guys in marketing seem to have quite a good laugh. And I was like,
Ah.
okay, well, that marketing for me, then put me down for marketing. And they were really
Yeah.
good. Dixon's were really good.
Yeah.
They sent me up to the head office in Hemel Hempstead for a sort of 3-month secondment,
Mm.
3 week secondment to see if I enjoyed it,
Yeah.
and just to get a bit of work experience up there.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. The guys that I was working with seemed to think that I could be useful,
Mhm.
and so within a couple of weeks from that, they then said, yes, you can come and work in head office. I became a brand manager,
Right.
which was looking after kind of the brand, the advertising, the kind of all the branded collateral in store, and the
Yeah.
non-product related elements of retail, the services and so on.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that set me off on a completely different and largely, again, unplanned career journey. And I,
And sorry to interrupt you. It's really interesting that you go from sales discipline into marketing, because often people will say that there's a constant battle between sales and marketing and they don't understand each other. Um, and it seems, I don't know, like kind of great thinking on the part of your area manager and the organization to say, this person's got some skills and qualities here, let's put them in another department and see how they get on. It's
yeah,
not you haven't got a child institute of marketing, you can't come here. So I'm intrigued by what there was maybe about the culture at Dixon's that made that possible.
yeah, it's a really good question. And I think Dixon's was very much a meritocracy, right?
Mm,
If you were good, if you could prove that you had a work ethic and you were
mm,
prepared to get on and do things, it was very, you weren't limited at all.
mm,
There wasn't a bar that said everybody must have a degree that works in our marketing team or whatever. They were
yeah,
looking for skills, and they were very, very happy to promote from within.
mm,
Um, I don't know what that comes down to. It was originally a family company, right? It ultimately
yeah,
came from that. So I don't know whether it comes from that heritage, whether or not it was that they just felt that they could take young potential and mold it into what they needed. I don't know, but
yeah,
it was there was never a conversation that I can recall which was do you think you're qualified to do this job? It was
yeah.
always do you have the aptitude? Do you
Mm,
have the skills? I think they valued entrepreneurialism, and you're right, I was quite entrepreneurial. I think they
yeah,
valued sort of street smarts as
yeah,
much as they valued book smarts,
yeah,
because all of those are things you need when you're on the shop floor. And it was a company that took people from the shop floor. You need to
yeah,
be personable, aware of what's going on, know your stuff. You don't
mm,
need to know the theory of marketing or
mm,
sales. You do need to know why that washing machine is good for Mrs. Jones, who lives just
yeah,
down the road, right? So,
yeah,
and you're constantly reacting to the sort of inputs you get from the customer, and adjusting your
yeah,
style to suit. So it's quite I would say they valued EQ as much as they valued IQ. So yeah,
mm,
it was quite an empowering organisation to work in,
mm.
and as I say, they backed you for success. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's intriguing actually, just that you say about EQ, because there will be a lot of corporates that like talk about this like they discovered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been going on for years in
Yeah,
retail and
yeah.
yeah, family-run businesses. Where did you go from there? What what
So
moved
the
you forwards?
the challenge that I had with Dixon's, and I really enjoyed it there, and I did some amazing stuff, and I must just tell you one story just because I think you'll
Mm,
appreciate it. So we touched on Shed 7 and Speakeasy at the Link It's Easy.
mm,
So we also did an advert with animated dancing phones. Right? So
yeah,
I was involved in that. I can remember going to the store when we were doing it and seeing all the blue screen and so on. And the
yeah,
director of that ad was a
yeah.
guy called Alex Winter, who
Okay.
you would actually know as one of the awesome duo of Bill and Ted. So
No
they,
way.
yep,
No way.
yeah, no way, exactly.
Wow.
It was
Wow.
excellent, and yeah, so I got to meet this big Hollywood actor who was directing this not particularly big um, uh, advert for some little mobile phone company in the UK. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, interesting aside, but yeah, little claim to fame there. I know.
Yeah.
I can never remember. Yeah, he is Ted Theodore Logan in the movie, isn't he?
Right.
That's who he plays.
Yeah. Blimey. Who'd have thunk it? And now we know.
Absolutely, absolutely. So once you've done that, your career at Dixon's is complete.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and actually, yeah, by then my domestic situation had changed quite a bit. So I
Hmm.
had two children, two small girls,
Yeah.
and I was living away from home because Dixon's head office was in Hemel Hempstead, and
Mm.
home was in a little village called Collingbourne Kingston in Wiltshire,
Yeah.
and it felt like it was time to get a bit closer to home. So
Yeah.
I wanted to stay in the telecoms arena, and
Hmm.
I'd found some interesting jobs at Vodafone, which of course is based in Newbury, which was much
Yeah.
closer to home.
Yeah.
And I started applying for those,
Hmm.
initially unsuccessfully.
Hmm.
So there was a couple of jobs I applied for, and I got rejected without an interview.
Hmm.
Um, and that was an interesting learning for me because when I did get an interview, it was because I deleted all my qualifications off of my CV. Um,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, so I'd come to the conclusion I was getting rejected because I didn't have a degree, um,
Mm.
and it was just a really easy criteria to reject someone by. So I thought, no,
Yeah.
I'm gonna delete all my qualifications. I'm
Yeah.
going to force them to read my experience,
Yeah.
and hopefully trigger them to ring me up,
Yeah.
and then it's up to me then, right? Then it's not about what's written on a piece of paper, it's up to me, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
They
That's
rang us up, me up.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Did at that point in time, were you applying via a like web form, or because I know that there has been, there are organizations that will filter
Yeah,
electronically based on that.
yeah.
So
No, so this would have been late, no, early 2000s, I should think.
okay.
So no, it was still very much application letter in the
Yeah.
post with a copy of your CV.
Yeah.
Presumably, someone in HR is reading it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
It's
and
fascinating.
it really is. And the conversation that I got was, we're not entirely certain you're an exact fit, but
Mm.
we'd quite like to talk to you. So,
Yeah.
so then I just kind of thought, right, okay, bring my A game, did lots of preparation,
Yeah.
made certain I knew what I was going after. And I was,
Yeah.
when I got the job, I was really excited. It felt like it was a move into a different world, out of
Yeah.
retail into telecoms operator,
Mm.
kind of big blue chip company. I was
Yeah.
very proud of working for Vodafone,
Yeah.
and yeah, and that opened up a whole new career. So it extended my marketing career. I
Hmm.
worked in a number of different roles in marketing. I became a grad manager, which the irony of
Okay.
that somewhat amused me. So when Vodafone was bringing people on the grad scheme, I was someone that mentored and
Yeah.
looked after those grads. So
Yeah.
that was kind of good fun.
And
Um,
how did they respond to you not having been to uni? Because I'm sure they would have asked you where you went.
do you know? I don't recall any of them asking me that.
Oh, okay.
I suspect it was assumed. At that
Yeah.
point, I suspect it was assumed I had a degree.
Yeah.
But I was always really, I didn't wear it as a chip on my shoulder. I was always, I
Mm.
didn't go to university. If they would have had asked me what
Mm.
university I went to, I would undoubtedly have said the University of Life, because
Yeah.
that's the sort of glib response you give to people
Yeah.
sometimes, isn't it? But
Yeah.
no, I don't recall it coming up, because
Mm.
yeah, my role was to help them orientate themselves around the organisation, right, and
Mm.
understand how, think about how things worked, not in an academic scenario, not where you're the brightest
Yeah.
person in the room, or maybe you are the brightest person in the room, but you probably haven't got the decision. So you've got to learn how to influence. You've got to learn
Yeah.
how to read the room. You've got to think about which battles you want to win. So it was kind of more life skills, corporate orientation
Yeah.
that I sort of helped them with, I think.
And what do you think, for you, being entrepreneurial and then that retail environment and retail management is different from being a corporate services led organization? Um, how did you find that experience of learning the corporate world?
It was very different. I think there was some things that almost shocked me initially.
Mm.
Retail's very can do. The trading meetings on Monday,
Yeah.
you make the amendments, change the prices, put in the promotion. It's all done by Friday, ready for the
Yeah.
Saturday's trading.
Yeah.
Um, Vodafone ran a 6-week campaign cycle,
Okay.
and I found that enormously frustrating. It's like, we can do this in less than 6 weeks. Come on. But it
Yeah.
was because it was, there was so many more people to engage. There
Yeah.
was Decisions were bigger in financial value, and you had a lot of political things to manage as well. So
Yeah.
that was quite a learning curve for me. Um, and I think I was helped by the fact that, again, I just used my personal skills. The ability to sell an idea is really helpful.
Yeah.
That's the skill that you need in marketing as much as you need in sales. The ability to
Yeah.
sell something, a concept, an idea.
Yeah.
Um, and I think just, again, the fact that I could adapt my style, excuse me, adapt my style to the audience was really helpful.
Yeah.
Which, again, you do in sales, right? If you're
Yeah.
selling a washing machine to an old lady, it's a very different thing to selling an Xbox to a guy in his 20s, right? You have to
Yeah.
adapt and change.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that. I had a very boring conversation with a friend of mine, but plays to your point. We've both got new washing machines. We're going, oh, it's got a 1600 spin cycle and a 1200, but not a 1400. um, but we're curious about that. However, what strikes me about what you just said was that I just want a washing machine that does the job. I use like two settings. When my son is looking at a games console, he is so well informed. He will tell you everything about the graphics card, the memory, what you can get on it. So it's quite, like you say, if you've got a 20-year-old coming in, they want to buy a console, it's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you need to be able I mean, as much in life as in sales, right? You need to be able to react and respond to all those different
Yeah,
inputs, right?
yeah,
And I think that's been really helpful for me. That I think in general I can react and
yeah,
respond to that, and tailor my delivery for the person that I'm dealing with at the time.
yeah.
So yeah,
Hmm.
that's been a useful skill.
And I think that's a really great, almost like tip or piece of advice for people who are entering workplaces where they think, oh, maybe I don't have the corporate experience or I'm not sure how to frame what I have to offer. But just that example of, as you say, being in that kind of business to consumer, face to face, acting on instinct and responding directly to input is a huge skill that a lot of people would be terrified of being placed in that kind of situation.
Yeah, no, I think it is, and I think it's something that you develop over time, and I
Mm,
think it's something you develop through meeting a real breadth of people as well.
mm,
Right? You know, when you're at university, you are surrounded by university students, so there'll be an
yeah,
element of groupthink and
yeah,
understanding it. When you go into the workplace or when
mm,
you are working on a shop floor somewhere, you are
mm,
dealing with a very diverse range of people, and it's
yeah,
really useful to learn and understand all the segments, all the people, how to work
mm,
with them, how to sort of get on in that
yeah,
world. And I think that's been, you know, one of the things I would always encourage people to do is just, you know, get to know lots and lots of different people and learn stuff. You don't have to like them all, but you need to
yeah,
understand and learn, and you know, don't
yeah,
even have to agree with their opinions, but at least understand it. When I was going for Sandhurst, the
mm,
one of the standard questions they'd ask you is, what newspaper do you read? Which
yeah,
sounds hilarious because like nobody reads a newspaper now, or very few people read a
yeah,
newspaper for their news. And they would always say, yeah, and you'd always go, oh yes, the Times or something
mm,
quite weighty and, you know,
yeah,
highbrow. And they go,
yeah,
you need to be reading the Sun, the
yeah,
Mirror, and the News of the World, because your soldiers will be
mm,
reading those newspapers, and that is
yeah,
going to form their opinions, and you need to understand their opinions. And I always thought that
mm,
was really insightful in terms of understanding your audience and making
yeah,
certain that you can speak their language and understand how they interpret the information that they see.
yeah. That's great. Um, so you're not at Vodafone now.
No,
What happened?
so it's not uncommon in Vodafone to get made redundant. It's a very regular occurrence.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
and I can remember the first time it happened, and I was
Mm,
vaguely traumatized. You know, it's like, you know,
yeah,
there was meetings, and some people went into a room and you never saw them again, and some people went to the same room I went, and you stayed, and that was like, oh my god, you know, I can't believe this is happening.
yeah,
After 12 years at Vodafone, you were very used to that process,
mm,
and they did it very well, and they did it very professionally.
yeah,
And I got the tap on the shoulder at one point, having done a whole
hmm,
bunch of roles with them. I finished up being a chief marketing officer for a joint venture they did with Sainsbury's.
yeah,
But I got the tap on the shoulder. Um, and broadly, the conversation is, you know, thanks very much. You've been here a really long time. We
mm,
don't think we really need you anymore. Here's a letter. It's got some
yeah,
numbers in it which we think you'll like.
yeah,
Um, Off you pop, basically.
yeah,
And I was happy to accept the redundancy. I really enjoyed my time at Vodafone, but it
yeah,
was a good opportunity with a very meaningful amount of parachute money that
yeah.
allowed me to kind of think about what I wanted to do when I grew up.
Okay.
So I took the redundancy package. Um, I went and worked. I went straight from Vodafone. I had like 3 months gardening leave, and then went straight to
Mm-hmm,
work for a smaller startup company.
mm-hmm,
That went spectacularly bust about 6 months later. So I got made redundant a second time,
yeah,
much less pleasant. People came
yeah.
in and repossessed the seats and the laptops and all that sort of thing,
Wow.
because we'd literally gone bust.
Yeah.
And at that point, I thought, be made redundant twice in a year.
Mm,
How do I make certain I never get redundant again? I know, I'll
yeah,
start my own company. So
yeah.
that's what I did. So my company's called Graystone.
Mm-hmm,
The smart people have realised my name is James Gray, so I'm the Gray
yeah,
part of it. There is a guy called Tim Stone, who
yeah.
was an enterprise director at Vodafone. He's the Stone part of it, and we set up
Ah,
a little consultancy.
yeah,
Um, Tim had a terrible boat habit, which meant that he had to take vast sums of money and shovel it into the sea. So it
yeah,
became clear to him that actually the consultant's life wasn't for him. So he went and
yeah.
got a full-time job. He runs an investment fund now.
Okay.
But I continue to run with Greystone. We've been going for 8 or 9 years,
Yeah,
and I really enjoy it because I'm master of my own destiny. You know, I've
yeah,
never had to sit in a personal development review in the last 9 years. That's extremely liberating.
yeah. It's and what do you think it is? about you or your mindset that, so, this is timely in that there's been a swathe of redundancies or tech layoffs, as it's being kind of phrased. And for some people, it has been a very shocking and upsetting experience because certainly I think in the US, it's a lot more brutal when you lose your job. And actually someone who I work with wrote a great piece about when 2E2 that she used to work for went bust. So you had that experience of being laid off by an enormous organization and then being an organization where the money's gone. How did you find the resilience to go, I'm going to take control of this and create my own business?
So I think I've always been quite can-do. I think I've always had belief, stepping back to that time in Bath, when I believed I could be the top store in the company, I was the top store in the company. So I've always learned, or over a period of time, I've learned to back myself and believe that I can achieve whatever I want to achieve. I think I was emboldened by the fact that I banked my Vodafone redundancy. So I knew that I could not be very good at being a consultant for about a year. So I could learn the ropes and not be financially bereft. But I think, a lot of it came down to just self-belief and believing that I had the skills, I knew my subject matter, I knew what I could do. I'm very fortunate that I've got an incredible network of people that I have worked with, that I do work with, that are clients, that are friends, and most of my work comes through personal referral. So I'm very fortunate that the first big gig I got, a guy I used to work with rang me up and said, "Would you like to come and do this job in Ireland? It's a week of proposition development workshops. Would you like to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. Wow, a week, fantastic." And 18 months later, I rolled off of that project because
okay.
So I did the workshops. Then they asked me to come back and for 3 months and implement some of the stuff that came out of the workshops. Then they said, "Would you mind staying for a bit longer?" At one point, I was in a meeting where they said, "And James is going to be the commercial director. We're not going to recruit one now." And I was like, "Am I? Okay, fine. Yeah, that's cool."
Yeah, sure.
So that was so I've been very fortunate in that respect. But I do think I would have never have done it if I hadn't been made redundant by Vodafone, right? If that hadn't happened, there's a very good chance I'd have continued working with Vodafone, or maybe I'd gone to work for O2 or BT, but I'd have stayed in that, I won't say rut, but in that channel, in that stream. And I frequently see the notices about redundancies, and I offer people who I've known that have worked in Vodafone or other place where they get made redundant, often call me and ask me what life's like after redundancy. And I can honestly put my hand on my heart and say I have not met anybody who has not used it as a springboard to go and do bigger, better, more interesting things. Not everyone sets up their own company. Sometimes they just say, "Do you know what? I'm going to take a year out and enjoy life and not worry about my phone ringing and emails and stuff like that." But almost everybody I know has dug some positive out of it. So I'm always happy to talk to anyone that's gone through or is on their redundancy journey, and always happy to sort of tell my story and hope that they can see that there's great opportunity, and sometimes we all need a little bit of a change in perspective, right? When I left Vodafone, I was very, very Vodaclone. I was very red throughout, and I had to sort of relearn, because again, back to my point about if all your peers have a similar sort of thinking and mindset and background to you assimilate into that group thing. So it was really good to then come out and think about, no, that's the way they did it. Is it the right way? Maybe it's not the right way. Maybe there's a different way. So I think it's always very, very useful to kind of use it as a springboard. And as I say, it wasn't a bad story for me, and most of the people I know,
No.
there's always been some positive that's come out of it in one way or another.
And how does consultancy kind of differ from setting up a small business? I think that's quite interesting, I think, to understand, because there are lots of people that set up on their own and provide specific discrete services that don't necessarily want to build to an exit in the way that someone who creates a marketing agency might want to do.
Yeah. So it won't surprise you to learn that I don't really have a life plan for my business.
Oh, okay.
You know, I can remember talking to someone about careers a while back, and they said there's different types of career people. Some people are explorers, some people are lorry drivers. Lorry drivers have a very fixed idea on where they want to go, and they drive their lorry to it. Explorers wander around and they go, oh, there's a butterfly over there, and they walk over there and look at the butterfly. Oh, that's an interesting tree. I'm very much an explorer. So running the consultancy kind of suits the way I work, because there's a regular flow of different interesting clients to work with, people to talk to, problems to solve. Unlike a marketing agency, which is quite a good analogy, unlike a marketing agency, you know, it's not, I'm not building to an exit. I've not got a product. So if I was a product company, I might have a product that, you know, an IP. My product is me, largely me and my team of associates that work with me, and the experience and the information and the capabilities that we have. So it's very much about skills and experience. And that's not something you can sell unless you go with it, right? So if I sold Graystone to a bigger agency, I'd still have to be doing what I'm doing, because that's where the value comes from. But I'd be doing it for somebody else, and that's a big switch in my head. You know, in corporate world, you know, I worked really hard, and you know, and I started to begrudge working late nights and weekends. In my world, I'll work just as hard for a client, and I'll work evenings and weekends and nights and all the stuff that I need to do, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because I'm doing it for me, because that client is paying my company, and I'm, you know, and I'm doing it for me. Secondly, my name on the door, so it's got to be a good quality job done, and you know, I'm very motivated to do that. And I think that's one of the interesting things that comes up a lot if you work in consulting, is people think you're doing it until you can find a proper job. Yeah, there's a lot of people that kind of think consulting is something you do in between jobs. It's like, well, I've been in between jobs for 9 years or whatever, so no. And I have been, I have been offered permanent roles with clients saying, why don't you come and work for us? And it's not that I don't enjoy the organisation I'm working with. It's not I don't enjoy the people I'm working with. There is just something in my head which says, no, I want to do this 100% for me. And there's a switch in there somewhere about motivation. And as soon as you're doing it not for you, not for your family, you're doing it to enrich a corporation rather than a small group of individuals. It's a difficult one. Now I've switched one way, I'd find it very difficult to switch back. I always say I'm never going to have a proper job. I'll always keep doing this or something like this. And it's not something I'd have planned ever.
Interesting for someone that had a very clear plan in the beginning. So I won't ask you anything that might, set the horses running. But what's next that you can share? What do you think? What do you hope for?
A lottery win, definitly is.
Do you play the lottery?
I do play the lottery. Yeah. And I got premium bonds and all that sort of stuff. I enjoy the excitement of getting a text message or an email that says something good's happened. And it's normally a fiver or something, but it's still I enjoy the excitement. So longer term, what's the plan? So ultimately, I would like to retire. I don't
Hmm.
see me ever fully retiring.
Mm.
My mum and dad, both in their late 70s, still work.
Yeah.
And I envisage that I will be the same, but I might get to pick and choose the work a
Hmm.
little bit more that I do.
Hmm.
I've just recently started working with a charity. So I've tried to start thinking about giving something back and paying it forward and all those sort of good
Yeah.
things. So I'm both a fundraiser for a charity called Frontline Children,
Yeah.
but also I'm on the board of trustees as well, and that's good too because again I'm
Yeah.
using my skills for good, benefiting other people, but I get a lot out of it as well. Um,
And we should say, actually, because you were kind enough to introduce me to Jordan Wiley, who's previous guest, that Frontline Children supports children into education who
yeah,
otherwise would not have access in war zones. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a great little charity. It's a very small charity, and
Mm.
I came to it via Jordan. So Jordan was a
Mhm.
client originally,
Yeah.
and became a friend and
Yeah.
asked me to get involved in the charity. So yes, the charity um, has been going for a while. We've built a school in Djibouti.
Mhm.
We are now doing support grants for children in orphanages in Ukraine. There's work going on in Syria. And the latest thing that's really quite interesting is we're starting to work on secret schools in Afghanistan. So
Wow.
as you probably know, the government in Afghanistan have stopped women going to school.
Yeah.
And as a father of two girls,
Mm.
I find that terrible. And so
Mm.
there are secret schools springing up where people
Wow.
who have education, people who maybe were in the education system, who said, right, well, I'm going to, in my basement, set up a little school and teach
Wow.
the local girls. Obviously, you can't talk too much about it because
No.
it's not um, it's not sanctioned by the
Yeah.
government, but we're doing what we can to help in that area as well.
Wow. Made me quite emotional, James. Goodness. Okay. You mentioned your girls. Just briefly, how did your experience influence? I mean, your kids will only listen to so much input from their parents.
Yeah.
But how did your experience influence how you approached the education discussion with your daughters?
Um, so yeah, let's think. So I mean, both girls were um, quite keen on school initially. I think my youngest had more of a falling out of school or falling out with school after she'd done her A levels. But both enjoyed school. Both got a lot of the value out of the extracurricular activities. So Kate, my oldest, was very keen on dance. She actually went on to do a dance degree at Winchester University. Um, Charlotte was very musical and did um, tours all over the world playing her double bass.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
and but when we got onto the conversation of university, um, I was keen for them to go. It was a conversation that I knew I could support them with in terms of financially support them. When there was no way I was going to university, right? It
Yeah.
wasn't going to happen financially. Um, and one of the girls chose to go to university, and one of the
Mm.
girls chose to do a more vocational qualification to become a veterinary nurse and get paid whilst she was doing it. I don't think that there's a right or wrong way necessarily. I think you do what suits you right. I think Kate enjoyed her university experience, and Charlotte loves working with animals, and so she's enjoying what she's doing there. So I don't think I gave a lot of direction. I think I gave a bit of support.
Mm.
I think what I did find was I occasionally pushed back a bit harder on their teachers
Mm.
because the teachers were always, well, you'll never be a success if you don't go to university. And I was like,
Wow.
no, that's how you became a success in your thing because you had to go to university.
Yeah.
I didn't. And, you know,
Yeah.
and I think there is a strong drive for that in some schools, which is like, you've not
Mm,
made it unless you've got a degree.
mm,
And again, that's pitched out by teachers who all have
mm.
degrees.
I
Um,
love the framing of saying that's how you became a success. I think that's a really smart way to counter the argument.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, used to used to irritate me enormously, mine.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I think but yeah, I think, you know, I can see that university has benefit. I'm definitely not anti-university.
Mm,
It just didn't suit me for practical reasons. Couldn't afford it, and for other reasons, which is I wanted to go out and make my way. You know, I'd done, as far as I could see, I'd done my education bit, and it was now time to go and make my way and, you know, buy houses, fill it out with lodgers, sell washing machines. This time next year, Rodney, we'll be
we're
millionaires.
millionaires. Oh, well, I mean, that feels like a perfect place to kind of wrap up. I've really, really enjoyed speaking to you, James. I've learned something. I'll put links to the charity in the show
Yes,
notes.
please.
If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
My company website is Graystone, Gray with an A, graystonestrategy.com. I'm on LinkedIn, not too difficult to find, James Gray. Um, I would encourage people to go and look at the charity. We're very small. We love people to fundraise for us. We love
Mm.
just as much people's skills. So if anyone's made a New Year's resolution to give something back or to do a charity thing, go and find frontlinechildren.org. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we've got a website. And, you know, if you've got skills, we'd be delighted to take your skills. If you want to go and sit in a bath of beans and raise money for us, we'll be equally happy for you to do that.
Ah, brilliant. Thanks, James.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.